Welcome to Songwriting Tips and Chats with Nick Vulture. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I personally am on the lands of the Kaurna people in Adelaide, South Australia, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I recently posted on my Facebook page a request for people to suggest what they would like me to talk about in a future podcast. And one of the requests that came back, or suggestions, came from Jamie. Thank you, Jamie, asking me to talk about the editing process of songwriting and what you should be looking for when you're putting the finishing touches, I guess, on editing a song that you've composed. And I want to talk about that. I think it's a really good suggestion. But first, I want to talk about something that perhaps precedes that, and is something that I have noticed more recently with my songwriting, but also spoken to a couple of other songwriters about as well. And so I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the putting together of a song that comes from the subconscious. And I've noticed recently that I have been writing songs that I will say from my subconscious. So I'm putting words down in my notepad, as I've described in previous episodes, and I'm putting suggestions like themes down and ideas down in my notepad. And when it comes to putting them to some music, I don't really know what the story is about for quite some time. And I feel as though the more I reflect on that these songs and these words are coming from somewhere else. And so I put that down to the subconscious. And I'm not really sure for a large part of the process what the theme is, what the story is. It sounds strange, but I've noticed it more and more in recent times. And when I look back at my songwriting, particularly for my solo songwriting, I think it's been quite common. I often don't know what the story is until the song is complete or almost complete, which seems strange, but it seems as though others do this as well. So I guess my message here, or my tip, is don't worry about it. Go with it. You sometimes hear songwriters talk about just going with the flow and letting it happen and get it all down. I think that's another way of saying what I'm saying is don't dwell on the story. I recently spoke to someone about a song that he was writing, and we were talking about it, and he said that it actually started out about something else, and it ended up being about a different topic again. It's still quite a personal one, but a different topic, and he didn't even realize that until he'd finished the song. And I've noticed what I'm doing is something similar. I have the saying or the theme written down that I think I'm going to write about, but as I've mentioned before, also a saying, and then I put together the song around that, and then I get to a chorus or a bridge, and I'm finding I'm not even sure what it is that I'm singing about or that I'm writing about, and that's actually, it turns out that that's okay. I think it's actually a really healthy way to write the song. And what I'm finding from that is when I'm near the end of the song, and this is where we get to the editing process, I find that it starts to make sense, particularly when I go back through the editing of it and start to look at what it is I've just done and how it all sounds and what it all means, and if there's better ways of describing things. Then I start to work out, that's what this song is about. And once you start to understand what it is that's coming out of your subconscious onto the paper, that really helps with the editing process. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But my message here, as I've said, is let it happen. Let your subconscious take over in the songwriting. It's a really interesting way to do it. Don't worry too much about what it's saying at the time, and don't work too hard on what you think the topic is or the theme is. Like this isn't something that I would say happens all of the time. Sometimes you're very conscious of what you're writing about, and that's fine too. But I just wanted to talk about this subconscious songwriting because it is a thing, and I've realized it's not just a thing that I'm doing, it's a thing that others are doing. And it's a really interesting way of writing. And I think it can make for it makes the songwriting process really exciting because you don't know where it's going. And that's quite fun. Yeah. And this has happened to me recently with a song that I just have completed. And it ended up being about something that I used to think about a lot as a kid. But the verses, I only had the verses, and I didn't have a chorus yet. And then I got to this stage of the song where I felt like it was, three quarters done, but I still didn't quite have a chorus nailed. And I looked back on it and I thought, what am I writing about here? And then I thought about it and I thought about it, and I spent a couple of days just letting it sit. And I realized what I'm writing about was my childhood and things that I felt or thought when I was a kid. And then that really helped me finish off the song. So this is where now I want to transition into the editing discussion and talk about the transition of the subconscious songwriting into the conscious. Now, it's not always going to be the subconscious. As I said, sometimes you do write quite knowingly about a topic. Be careful about that though, because as I've said before, the songwriter that I was talking to recently, he thought he was writing about a topic, it ended up being about something else. So don't commit to it completely that it is what you think it is. So anyway, transitioning from the initial songwriting, whether it be from the conscious or the subconscious, into something that's clearly conscious, which is the editing process. And this is where you start to work out what the song is about, what's the message you're trying to get across, what are you trying to relay. There's no doubt that if you're writing these songs for public consumption, that you're trying to say something to people, even if you think you're only saying it to yourself, which in part you are, of course. Songwriting is often about getting your own thoughts out, and for that reason, it's quite therapeutic. And so in some ways you are writing it for yourself, but there's an element of it, no doubt, you're writing for others. So what are you trying to say? What's the message? So this is the time. You've written everything you can, you've put it to music, you've put it to some chords or a rhythm, and you're now sitting down and reflecting on it, and you're wanting to do some editing around it. So this is where you really need to know now, before you start your editing, before you go too far with your editing, what is this song about? Write that down, or get it clear in your head. You don't have to write it down, but get it clear. What is this song about? Once you know that, then you can start to get into the editing in a more serious way. So I'm going to give my top 3 things that I look out for when I'm editing a song. Once I know what the song is about and I feel as though it's at a stage where I'm reflecting on it and wanting to perfect it and finish it, the first thing that I look for is the words, or look at is the words. And what I'm looking for with the words is 2 things. One is, are the words telling the story in the best possible way? Are they saying things in a way that flows nicely as well? So this is the phrasing part of it I've talked about before. Do the words sound good? So 2 parts to the words. Are they telling the story, or do I need to change something a little bit now that I know completely what this song is about? Is there something I need to change? Is there something I need to add? Is there something I need to take out? Get the words to tell the story better now that you know what it is that you're singing about. Make sure the words are telling the story. The second part to the words is, do they sound good in the rhythm? Is it sitting nicely? Is it flowing? Does it work well? Or is there a bit that's a bit... Sometimes I feel like you can squeeze words in for the sake of getting a story out. You can squeeze them in, or you can even drag a sentence out to try and make it fit. Be careful of that, like really watch that, and that's where editing is so important. Make sure it's got a nice flow. If it's squeezed in, find another way of saying it. Take some words out. Find another way of saying that bit that's squeezed in. If you're dragging a word out to make it fit, find some other words to put in. It's as simple as that. Get it to sound good. Don't lose the context. Don't lose the story, but make sure that it sounds good. So that's the first part, is getting the words right. Now that you know what the story is 100% about and you know what you're singing about, make sure you got the words to tell the story and make sure they sound good. I want to talk a little bit about where I wish I had edited better. I've got this song called Nobody Is You, and there's a line in there that says, "We were talking out loud to somebody we know." Of course, I don't remember his name. That's the line. On reflection, when I think back, and I've recorded this song now, so it's a bit late, although I can change it for live performances, obviously. But the words, "I was talking out loud to somebody we know," I was talking out loud. When you think about that, it's not a great use of words. I was talking out loud. Of course, you were talking out loud. It's obvious. You don't talk in your head to somebody, you talk out loud. So it sort of didn't need, "I was talking out loud." What it should have said is something like, "I was talking down the street. I was talking down the street to somebody we know," or "I was talking somewhere to somebody we know." Still get it to flow nice, but on reflection, I wish I had thought about that a little bit more before I recorded the song. So that's an idea of where editing is important, is to make sure your words don't just sit there because you want them to sound good. They also have to tell the story. And I think what I'd done there is got them to sound good in the flow, but I could have done it better. I could have found a better use of words. I was talking down the street to somebody we know instead I was talking out loud. Anyway, that's just an example of getting your words right, the story and the phrasing. It's an interesting mix, and that's a key part of editing. The second part to editing is to make sure that your music or your composition, like the actual music element, is what you need. Are you using, is it interesting? Does it need something? Has it got what it needs to catch attention? Does it need a bridge? Does it need to be longer? Does it need to be shorter? Make sure that the composition is interesting, it sits with the story. And remember this, you're always looking for that hook. Ask yourself, what's the hook in this song? What's the hook? What's the bit that's going to get people's attention in this song before you finish it off? What's the hook? Really important. So this is where the composition part of the editing is important. My advice, don't write 7-minute songs. Don't write 6-minute songs. Even be careful of 5-minute songs. I'd be looking maximum, for me, about, the classic 3 to 3.5 minute, length is good, because that's what people can focus on. It tells a story succinctly, and it keeps the song more interesting. So the composition is important. What does it need? Does it need something that you've missed, or does it actually sound great? Is it sounding really good already, and it's already working for you? But ask yourself that question, and the key part to that question is, what's the hook here? What is going to drag people into this song? What's going to keep them there? What's that hook? If you don't feel as though there's a hook, you need to keep working on the song. It might need like I say, a bridge or a pre-chorus, or the chorus might need something different, something more catchy. It might need a different set of chords to differentiate the song from the rest of the song, etc., or that part of the song from the rest of the song, etc. So the music composition is the second part of the editing. And then the final part for me is just to ask yourself, how should you start this song and how should you finish this song? Have you got the start and the finish right? Are you going to start it by playing a little introduction before you sing, or are you going to start with the singing bang right at the front end of the song with no lead in, no intro? How are you going to start the song? And then also, how are you going to finish the song? What's going to finish the song that's interesting? Are you going to finish it all of a sudden? Are you going to play a set of chords or one chord? You're going to finish where you start, or are you going to finish somewhere else? So, for example, if it starts in G, are you going to finish in G, or are you going to try something different? All of those things. So the start and the finish, just make sure you get them right and you nail them. In the song that I was talking about, that I've just written about, things that I used to think about as a kid, the finish actually took me the longest to work out, and I wasn't happy with the finish. And then a few nights ago, I was lying in bed trying to sleep, and it came to me. It came to me straight away. So I quickly got my phone, which was next to my bed, and I emailed myself what I was thinking about the finish of the song. The next morning when I got up, I got the guitar, I tried it, perfect. That was it. So it won't always come to you when you're sitting down working on the song. It'll come to you potentially at strange times. I find it's, and you might remember the conversation that I had with Jen Lush on an earlier podcast. Sometimes these things come to you when your mind is almost in a meditative state. You could be out walking, you could be, exercising, you could be cooking, you could be sleeping. It often these finer details that you're trying to work out when you're sitting down working on the song and they're not coming to you. Often they come to you in those moments. So be ready. That's why phones are so great, because they have notepads on them, and you don't need to carry around a pen and paper anymore. You can get it down straight away. So that's today's episode, writing subconsciously. I wanted to talk about that. It's a thing, and it's more common than I thought, and it's certainly something that's become more common to my songwriting. So the message there is, or the thinking there is, just let it happen. Don't worry too much about it, and think about it later in the process. Look back at the song and ask yourself, what is this really about? Because once you know that, then you can get into the next stage, which is the editing stage. So once you know what the song is about, and in the process of writing, don't ask yourself that question. Do that later. Get the song down, get it to a point where you feel like it's 80%, 90% done. Then ask yourself, okay, what am I writing here? What is this really about? Even if you think you know what it's about, just check in, because you might have done something different. You might have subconsciously taken a deviation and started singing about something else. I think if we all look back at our songs that we've written, there are times when we would find that we actually are singing about something else. So it's really important to acknowledge that and know that it happens, and go with it. Let it happen. Let it flow. Once you realize that you don't need to catch yourself yet on the song because you're not sure what it all means. Once you realize that it's okay to let that happen, it's really exciting to see what will happen after that. So then once you're at that point of now editing and working out what the song really means, then you can get your words right, you get your phrasing right, you can look over the music composition, and then finally just double check your start and your finish and that they work well for you. That's today's episode. Thank you very much. We'll speak again soon.